The message came in the middle of a calm galactic night, a time when most members of the Great Council were relaxed, discussing small matters and routine trade issues. No one expected anything unusual. The lights inside the large circular hall were dim and peaceful, and the atmosphere felt slow, almost sleepy. But all of that changed the moment an urgent signal lit up the central display. The room went silent as the alarm echoed through the chamber, cutting through the calm like a blade. A junior attendant hurried forward, their voice shaking slightly, as they announced that an emergency transmission had arrived from the deep space monitoring stations. These stations rarely sent alerts, and when they did, it was never something small. The senior counselors turned toward the display, their eyes widening as they saw the data unfold. A powerful alien war faction fleet had begun moving toward a small blue-green planet located near the edge of a quiet spiral galaxy. The name of the planet appeared on the screen in soft glowing letters. Earth. For a moment, no one reacted. It felt too strange, too unexpected. Earth was not a threat. Earth was not part of any interstellar alliance. Earth barely understood that other life existed beyond their atmosphere. Many in the galaxy considered Earth a young, developing world, still learning how to manage its own technology and social problems. Why would a war faction waste their strength on such a place? It made no sense. One senior counselor finally spoke, their voice heavy with worry. Why Earth? What reason do they have? That species is still new. They're not ready for something like this. Another member shook their heads slowly. Maybe the attackers think humans are too weak to fight back. Maybe they want an easy victory, but others disagreed. One counselor leaned forward, tapping a finger on the display. This faction does not attack without motive. They have a long history of destroying or enslaving civilizations that refuse to kneel. But Earth? They have no communication with them, no trade, no territorial overlap. The humans don't even know who they are. The debate grew louder. Some thought the war faction had gone mad or become desperate. Others feared this attack might be a test, a warning to the entire galaxy. If they wanted to make an example out of someone, Earth would be a simple target. A target no one expected to fight back. But at the same time, there was something else in the room. A quiet thought none of them said aloud yet. If the faction really believed Earth was harmless, then they didn't understand humans at all. The Council continued to study the data. The enemy fleet was large, far too large for a planet like Earth to handle with its current technology. Comfortable civilizations that had existed peacefully for centuries had fallen to smaller forces. So what chance did a young species like humans have? The Council began discussing emergency plans. Should they attempt to warn Earth? Should they send a defense fleet? Should they negotiate with the attackers? Every option felt risky. The enemy faction did not listen to negotiations. And even if the Council sent a fleet, it would arrive too late. One counselor sighed deeply, rubbing their forehead. Earth will not see them coming. They won't understand what this is. They'll think it's some kind of comet or unknown signal. The moment they realize the truth, it might already be too late. But another counselor shook their head and spoke in a thoughtful tone. Humans surprise us all the time. Their world may be young, but the species itself, they adapt quickly. They endure extreme weather, shifting environments, disease, disasters. Their history itself is full of challenges. They pushed through all of it. They don't give up easily. Several others nodded at these words, though none looked convinced. Hope was thin in the room. Still, they all understood that something had to be done quickly. After a long argument, they agreed to send a diplomat, not to warn Earth directly, since that could cause panic or break interstellar laws, but to observe the situation and gather information. They needed to understand why the enemy faction was interested in Earth and what might happen next. Maybe, just maybe, They could find a peaceful way to stop the attack. A quiet hush fell over the room as the diplomat prepared to leave. There, small ship lifted into space with almost no sound, vanishing into the star-filled darkness. Back in the hall, the council replayed Earth's data, images of cities, oceans, forests, and human activity. They saw the bright lights of human towns at night, the busy highways, the satellites orbiting the planet, the aircraft flying through the sky, and millions of people living their daily lives with no knowledge that something enormous was heading toward them. A council member softly whispered, "They have no idea what is coming." Another replied, "And we have no idea how they will react." Though the council was hyper-advanced, with technology far beyond what humanity could imagine, there was one thing they respected deeply: the unpredictable nature of young species. These species did not always follow logic. They had emotions, instincts, and raw determination. Humans especially were known for their strange mix of creativity and stubbornness. They found solutions even when nothing made sense. They pushed forward even when everything seemed impossible. But what would happen when that stubbornness faced a massive fleet with weapons Earth had never seen? The council did not know. The night continued with the council examining every bit of information they had about the war faction's movements. The enemy was not hiding. They wanted the galaxy to know what they were doing. Their ships traveled in a straight, confident line toward Earth, a clear sign that they expected no resistance. The more the council studied, the more worried they became. They expected a disaster, a tragedy, a young world being attacked before it had a chance to join the galaxy properly. Some counselors argued to intervene directly, even if it was against rules. Others warned that stepping in could start a much bigger war, one that could spread across many star systems. And for a long time, no one could find a solution that made sense. Finally, one older counselor stood and spoke. "If this faction thinks humans are weak, then maybe they do not understand the species at all. Humans are not predictable. They are not simple. They push limits. They survive storms that would break others. They make allies where others see enemies. They challenge themselves for no reason except to see if they can succeed." The hall grew quiet again. The words echoed in everyone's mind. The council looked again at the image of Earth. The oceans glowed blue. The continents shined with patches of gold from the lights of cities. Clouds drifted slowly across its surface. It looked peaceful, unaware, fragile. Yet something about the planet radiated a strange energy, life, movement, creativity, something impossible to measure through simple sensors. A counselor summed it up quietly. "If the war faction believes this will be an easy victory, then maybe they are the ones who are mistaken." Still, worry stayed beneath every thought. Even with human resilience, Earth's defenses were basic. Their spacecraft were limited. Their weapons were designed for local conflicts, not interstellar war. They had no energy shields, no star destroyers, no fleets traveling at high speeds through the galaxy. What humans had was courage, but courage alone might not stop an invasion. The diplomat's ship continued forward, traveling silently through space as the council waited. Every minute felt longer than the last. They all knew the next few days would decide the destiny of an entire species. Across the stars, the enemy fleet grew closer. Their engines glowed faintly as they cut through the darkness, moving with the calm confidence of a predator chasing easy prey. Inside the council hall, another message arrived, a simple update from the monitoring station. The fleet has accelerated. Estimated time until they reach Earth's system: short. Silence followed. The council stared at the glowing image of Earth once more, feeling the weight of uncertainty. No one knew whether they were about to witness the destruction of a young world or the rise of a species capable of changing the galaxy forever. The only clear thought any of them had was this: why Earth? Why humans? And the even more troubling question that no one said aloud: what if the attackers truly had no idea what kind of species they were about to provoke? The diplomat's small ship entered Earth's orbit quietly, like a shadow passing across the night sky. No human radar noticed. No alert sounded on Earth. The blue planet kept spinning calmly, unaware that someone from another world was watching them closely. The diplomat stood by the clear viewing window, looking down at Earth with both curiosity and concern. They had visited many worlds before, but Earth felt different right from the beginning. It wasn't the beauty of the oceans or the bright clusters of cities glowing at night. It was something else, something hard to define. They began observing, quietly, gathering information without interfering, as the council instructed. At first, the diplomat thought they would find an ordinary developing species. But as the days passed, they started noticing small details that surprised them again and again. The first thing that caught their attention was how active humans were. From space, the diplomat watched as thousands of aircraft crossed the sky. In every direction, like tiny insects buzzing around a hive. Ships moved across oceans. Cars and trucks filled long roads. People everywhere seemed to be in motion. Even at night, the cities didn't rest. Lights stayed on, workers kept working, and humans continued living as if time itself couldn't slow them down. The diplomat recorded the data, but even numbers couldn't show the full picture. Humans didn't just live, they pushed forward constantly. Soon, the diplomat moved their ship lower, scanning human behavior on the ground. They observed people, waking up early, rushing to work, taking care of families, facing problems, solving them, complaining, laughing, arguing, dreaming. Humans lived with a mix of emotions that looked chaotic, but somehow worked. Even when they were stressed or tired, they continued moving. One moment especially caught the diplomat's eye. They watched a small group of humans repairing a broken bridge. The weather was cold, and their equipment didn't seem advanced, but the workers kept trying different methods, talking through ideas and helping each other to stay motivated. They laughed, argued, then laughed again, and kept working until the job was done. The diplomat quietly noted, they do not give up easily. As more time passed, the diplomat also began studying human history, culture, and behavior through signals and broadcasts. What they found was astonishing. Humans had survived disasters that would have wiped out many advanced civilizations. Massive storms, earthquakes, diseases, wars, economic collapses. And still they kept moving forward. Humans were unpredictable. They invented new things constantly. They tried unusual solutions. They acted on emotion sometimes, logic other times, and occasionally pure instinct. It didn't always make sense, but somehow it worked for them. The diplomat watched as one human. Group practiced emergency drills, preparing for situations that might never happen. Another group trained athletes who pushed their bodies to limits that seemed impossible. Others created music, art, or stories that reflected joy, pain, hope, or fear. Humans expressed themselves in ways no machine or calculation could predict. More the diplomat learned, the more they realized something. Humans were far more complicated than the council believed. One night, while observing a small town, the diplomat saw a power outage affect the area. Instead of panicking, neighbors came out of their houses with flashlights, checking on each other, offering food, making jokes, helping fix the problem. In a situation where other species might freeze in fear or call for help, humans stepped forward even when they were scared. They adapt, the diplomat whispered, recording their thoughts. No matter the situation, they find a way to make it work. Meanwhile, the enemy fleet continued moving closer. The diplomat monitored their progress carefully and sent updates to the council. But what concerned the diplomat more was whether Earth had detected anything. Surprisingly, The planet's scientific stations had begun to notice a few unusual signals. A handful of observatories reported strange movements in the sky. But humans didn't panic. They didn't know what was coming, yet they kept analyzing things with curiosity. Trying to understand at one observatory, the diplomat watched a group of human scientists debating late at night. They looked tired, drinking coffee, arguing passionately, over a small dot on their screen. They didn't know it was part of the enemy fleet, but they sensed something new was happening. Even without full information, they were trying to prepare. This impressed the diplomat deeply. Many advanced species waited until danger arrived before reacting. Humans, on the other hand, questioned everything. They were always looking ahead, predicting, preparing, guessing, experimenting. They do not need certainty, the diplomat wrote in their log. They act even when the path is unclear. The diplomat then traveled to observe different environments. They saw humans living in freezing mountains, burning deserts, rainy forests, crowded cities, and small isolated villages. Everywhere, humans had adapted to survive. They built homes that fit the environment. They created tools to handle difficult situations. They developed food systems that worked even under harsh conditions. This resilience worried the diplomat in a new way. If humans were attacked, they would fight with everything they had, not because they were naturally violent, but because they protected what they loved. Humans fought for family, for freedom, for survival, for hope. Once they decided something mattered, they wouldn't let go easily. The diplomats suddenly understood something. The alien war faction had made a dangerous mistake. They thought humans would surrender quickly. They saw Earth as a simple target, but they did not understand the spirit behind this species. Humans didn't always win, but they always tried, even when the odds looked impossible. The diplomat sent a detailed message to the council. Humans are not what we believed. They will not go quietly. They will resist. Even if they think they cannot win, they will still fight. Their strength is not in their weapons. Their strength is in their will. After sending the message, the diplomat returned to observing Earth. They watched everyday people doing ordinary things, kids playing, elders sitting in parks, workers fixing roads, families eating meals. These simple moments carried a strange beauty. This was what humanity fought for: a peaceful, ordinary life. They loved laughter, music, food, conversation, and togetherness. They dreamed constantly of better jobs, better futures, new adventures. Diplomat felt unexpectedly emotional watching all of this. On many planets, war and fear shaped daily life. But on Earth, even with problems, life moved forward with color and energy as hours passed. The diplomat's ship detected the enemy fleet crossing another large distance. Their arrival time was getting shorter. The diplomat grew uneasy. The humans still didn't know the real threat approaching their world. But even without knowing, they kept living with determination at a coastal city. The diplomat observed fishermen preparing their boats early in the morning, working quietly as the sun rose. Far away, office workers waited for buses while students walked into schools. In another region, a group of volunteers planted trees, fixing land damaged by storms. Humans worked to repair even the planet itself, not just their buildings. The diplomat smiled softly. They move as one even when they don't realize it. Night returned, and the lights lit up on Earth like tiny stars scattered across the dark surface. The diplomat hovered above them, watching the planet breathe in and out like a living heart. After everything they had learned, the diplomat was certain of one thing: humanity was unpredictable in the best possible way. They were fragile yet strong, emotional yet logical, chaotic yet organized. They were full of contradictions, but that was what made them powerful. Their creativity made them dangerous to underestimate. Their unity during crisis made them impossible to break. The diplomats sent one final message to the council before resting. The war faction does not understand Earth. They believe they are choosing an easy target. But humans are not easy to defeat. They rise from difficulty. They fight even when hope is small. They protect what matters to them with everything they have. The diplomat looked down at Earth again and whispered quietly, almost like a prayer. They may be unprepared, but they are not weak. Far beyond Earth, the enemy fleet kept moving faster, engines glowing like distant sparks in the dark. The danger was getting closer with each hour. The diplomats stared into the stars, wondering what would happen next, not just to Earth, but to the entire galaxy. Would humans survive? Would they surprise everyone? Or would the war faction crush them before they could show their true strength? No one knew yet, but one thing was now clear. Earth was not a simple target, and the species living on it was far more extraordinary than anyone had expected. The diplomat had been observing Earth for many days now, watching people wake, work, sleep, and repeat their cycle with endless energy. Every hour, Earth looked more alive. Every moment showed something new, something surprising. But while the planet continued its normal routines, something far more dangerous was happening beyond the reach of human eyes. The enemy fleet had finally entered the edge of the solar system. The diplomat received the alert while watching the alert. Waves crash on a quiet beach below. A warning flashed across the ship's panel, showing a cluster of red dots entering the outer boundaries of the system. They were still far, but close enough now that the diplomat felt a cold weight in their chest. The galaxy's most feared war faction was no longer just approaching. They were here. Earth had no idea. The diplomat zoomed out the map. The red dots were moving in a tight formation, slow but steady, confident in every motion. Their weapons were hidden, their shields active, their engines silent and efficient. This was not a scouting group. It was a full invasion fleet. The diplomat quickly informed the council. The message returned was short, but carried heavy worry. Continue observing. Do not break protocol. We are preparing for potential intervention. But the diplomat knew the truth. The council had many rules, and one of them was clear. They could not openly interfere unless the invading faction attacked a council world. Earth was not part of the council. It was still considered an independent developing species. That meant the diplomat could do nothing but watch. Watching felt painful. The war faction ships crossed the orbit of the farthest planets, passing through the dark space where no human machine could detect them. They hid themselves cleverly, using advanced technology Earth had never seen. From Earth's point of view, everything looked normal, just another calm night sky. But on the diplomat screen, the threat grew bigger by the minute. Even though humans remained unaware, they started picking up small hints. A few observatories detected odd readings. A couple of satellites captured strange shadows. Scientists argued among themselves, trying to explain the signals. Most thought it was some natural phenomenon or a glitch. Some believed it was something man-made they hadn't accounted for. None imagined it was an incoming alien fleet. What impressed the diplomat most was how humans reacted even without knowing the danger. Instead of ignoring the strange signals, they examined them again and again, making long nights even longer. Their curiosity never stopped. They wanted answers, even if the truth was far beyond anything they had ever considered. As the fleet drew closer, Earth's military systems slowly began to respond. Not because they knew an attack was coming, but because unusual alerts kept popping up on their monitoring equipment. Some radar readings were inconsistent. A few cameras showed unusual lights far beyond the atmosphere. Humans didn't understand the cause, but they acted anyway. Governments across the planet quietly raised security levels. Air forces were placed on standby. Space agencies tried to communicate with their satellites in case one had malfunctioned. A few people on social media reported seeing strange stars, but no one took it too seriously. Even though humanity didn't know what was happening, something about their instinct made them more alert. It was as if humans were built to sense danger before it fully arrived. The diplomat watched in silence, feeling both proud of the species and deeply worried for them. Meanwhile, the enemy fleet slowed down as it approached the asteroid belt. From the diplomat's ship, they looked like a dark cloud drifting through space. Their formation was neat and sharp, each ship moving like a puzzle piece in a much larger pattern. These were not explorers. They were conquerors, the diplomat recorded. Every movement, sending the data back to the Council. But a part of them wished they could silently warn Earth. They had seen enough of humanity to know that if anyone could resist an impossible threat, it would be these unpredictable, stubborn beings. Back on Earth, life went on as usual. People went to school, went to work, sat in restaurants, laughed with friends, scrolled through their phones, and slept comfortably in their homes. They had no idea that powerful ships were entering their system with intentions that could change their world forever. Yet humans were not as helpless as they appeared. During the next few hours, the diplomat noticed something remarkable. Despite limited technology, humans detected patterns the war faction tried to hide. A handful of scientists from different countries compared data and realized something unnatural was happening. Their equipment wasn't broken. Something was. Out there. This discovery spread quietly across a small circle of experts. They didn't panic, but they were alert. They worked together, sharing information late into the night. Unidentified objects were approaching Earth. Even without knowing the scale of the threat, humans acted. Earth's networks began linking their defense systems. Old satellites were reactivated. Communication towers were tested. Air defense units were quietly strengthened. No one outside these circles noticed, but beneath the surface, humanity was slowly preparing. The diplomat felt a strange warmth watching all this unfold. They don't even know what's coming, they whispered. Yet they prepare anyway. The war faction fleet finally reached a point where they stopped hiding their movement. Their ships glowed faintly as they activated long-range scanners aimed at Earth. That faint glow was picked up by one of Earth's deep space telescopes. At first, the humans thought it was a star, but it moved too fast, changing direction with purpose. The humans thought it must be a new type of object. A comet, maybe. The more they realized this wasn't natural. News slowly leaked into small online communities. A few people posted screenshots of the mysterious moving light. Some believed it was a satellite. Some said it was nothing. A few joked that it might be aliens. No one imagined how close that guess was to the truth. At the same time, the diplomat detected something unexpected. Earth's detection systems began adjusting themselves. Humans started using older, forgotten satellites to run new calculations. They connected different observatories across the world to cross-check signals. It was messy, unorganized, and spontaneous, but it was working. Humans were piecing together a puzzle without having seen the full picture. Even in confusion, they were moving fast. The war faction noticed the increasing activity on Earth. They didn't understand it. They expected the humans to remain completely unaware until the last moment. But now they saw increased scanning patterns, unexpected energy spikes, and unusual human behavior. To the war faction, this was surprising and irritating. But to the diplomat, it was proof of the Council's earlier warning. Humans were adaptable, alert, and dangerously unpredictable. The more the humans sensed that something was wrong, the more they prepared. Military bases upgraded their defenses. Communication networks tested redundancies. Engineers checked equipment that hadn't been touched in years. On the surface, the world still looked peaceful, but beneath that peace, a quiet storm of preparation was building. The diplomat knew Earth's defenses were outdated compared to the incoming fleet. But the humans were not preparing out of fear, they were preparing out of instinct. That instinct was their greatest strength. Hours later, something escalated the situation. A small unmanned spacecraft sent by humans to monitor outer space passed close enough to detect a faint trace of one of the war faction's ships. The signal it received was unclear, distorted, but undeniably artificial. Something was out there. Humans didn't panic. They didn't freeze. They didn't give up. They immediately called emergency meetings, pulled out old research reports, and formed temporary teams to discover what the signal meant. The diplomat watched all of this with a mix of admiration and worry. Up in the sky, the war faction continued drifting closer, now less than a short distance away from Earth's outer defenses. Their ships formed a precise shape, a sign that their final preparations were beginning. The diplomat took a deep breath, knowing that the next hours would decide everything. Earth was waking up to the danger. Slowly, but definitely. Humans were preparing, even if they didn't fully understand what they were preparing for. Meanwhile, the war faction believed Earth would be simple to overwhelm. They underestimated the species completely. The diplomat stared at the two sides, one powerful and confident, the other young and determined. A quiet thought passed through the diplomat's mind. They think Earth will be easy. They have no idea. The moment the enemy fleet reached the edge of Earth's inner space, the air around the diplomat's ship felt heavy, like a storm had finally arrived after days of silent warning. The fleet no longer tried to hide. Their lights brightened, their scanners activated, and their formation spread out like a giant shadow covering the darkness of space. Back on Earth, humans still didn't know exactly what they were dealing with, but they had sensed enough to understand that something serious was happening. Plans were being made quietly. Different countries communicated more than usual. Leaders held late-night meetings behind closed doors. Scientists ran simulations again and again, and military organizations tested systems that had not been touched in decades. Humans still didn't know this was an alien invasion, but everything inside them, instinct, logic, fear, curiosity, told them to prepare. The enemy fleet sent out a powerful transmission toward Earth. It was the first open signal they had given. The diplomat listened from their ship, feeling a strange tightness in their chest. The message carried a clear and cold tone, a demand for Earth to surrender, for humans to accept the war faction's rule. The message reached Earth as nothing but strange noise at first. Computers struggled to translate it. Some scientists believed it was a coded message from deep space. Others were more direct and said, "This isn't natural." Humans worked endlessly for hours to break the signal down, trying to make sense of the patterns. Finally, they decoded the first line. It wasn't agreeing. It wasn't a warning. It was a command. It was the moment Earth realized something impossible but undeniable had happened. Someone out there was talking to them. Shock spread quietly across the groups who saw the decoded message. No panic. Just an intense and focused silence. Humans stared at the words. They tried to convince themselves this had to be a mistake, maybe a prank, maybe a glitch from a satellite. But deep inside, they knew the truth. The message was too purposeful, too organized, too heavy with intention. The diplomat watched as humans made their choice. They didn't hold long debates. They didn't freeze in fear. They didn't agree to anything. Their answer was simple. Earth refused to surrender. The refusal wasn't loud or dramatic. It wasn't a speech shared across the world. It was a calm decision made among leaders, military experts, and scientists who understood the meaning behind the message. When the enemy fleet received Earth's silent rejection, They reacted exactly as expected. Their ships shifted formation, preparing to move deeper into the system. They believed Earth was weak. They expected a quick, clean victory. The diplomat knew they were wrong, but even they weren't sure how wrong. Humanity had very little time, and their technology was far behind the fleets. But humans were different from most species. They didn't build only what they needed. They built extra, modified things, reused old tools, revived abandoned ideas. They turned everything into something useful. Earth immediately transformed into a world working with one mind. Engineers who had never built anything for space suddenly found themselves redesigning satellites. Scientists who studied deep oceans were now asked to help with atmospheric calculations. Tech workers who repaired communication towers were setting up new networks that linked far more places than before. Every hour mattered. The diplomat watched with amazement. Humans didn't know the details of the threat, but they could sense its presence, like feeling a storm approaching even before the clouds appeared. Something else happened too. People across the world began helping without being asked. Volunteers carried equipment. Students organized information. Retired experts returned to help. Inventors offered new ideas. It didn't matter where they lived or what language they spoke. When danger appeared, humans slowly but naturally moved toward each other. The war faction did not expect this at all. They had studied Earth's technology, but not Earth's spirit. As the fleet moved closer, humans began using everything they had. Old rockets were pulled from storage and upgraded. Satellites were adjusted to reflect signals the fleet might try to use. Engineers built temporary systems out of simple materials, creating solutions in hours that should have taken months. On one side of the planet, a group of mechanics turned a weather balloon into a high-altitude scanner. On another, university teams linked dozens of telescopes together, creating a massive network that could track movement in the sky. In some regions, small teams built defensive tools using leftover parts, not knowing if they would work, but trying. Anyway, humans didn't stop. They didn't waste time. They moved fast, faster than the war faction ever expected. Then came the moment that changed everything. The enemy fleet entered a range where Earth's equipment could finally see them clearly. Screens across the planet filled with dots and signals. It wasn't a glitch. It wasn't a comet. They were ships. Hundreds of them. Some people froze when they saw it. Some whispered in disbelief. Others felt fear run down their spine. But after a moment of quiet shock, humans did something unexpected. They got to work even harder. The diplomat felt their breath catch. Earth had reached a level of awareness that could easily turn into panic. But instead, humans became sharper, more focused, more determined. Earth sent out emergency alerts to key agencies. Long-range signals were activated. Backup power stations came online. Human pilots ran emergency simulations. Communication teams worked non-stop to keep everything aligned. It was chaotic, loud, and unorganized, yet somehow perfectly human. The war faction noticed this burst of activity. They didn't like it. To them, Earth should have been scared, confused, paralyzed. But instead, Earth looked ready. Not fully prepared, not fully armed, but ready in a way that made the war faction feel something they weren't used to feeling. Annoyed, maybe even uneasy. They broadcast a second message, louder and more aggressive. Yet humans didn't respond. It wasn't because they ignored the message. They simply didn't have time for pointless threats. The diplomats saw something else too. Humans weren't preparing only with machines. They were preparing emotionally. Families spent more time together. Friends called each other more often. People who hadn't spoken in years reached out again. It was as if the entire planet felt an invisible pressure and reacted with connection. not fear. Meanwhile, Earth's military forces finally made a visible move. Fighter jets launched into the sky. Ships moved into defensive positions. Old launch pads were reactivated. Scientists tested new communication codes. Teams worked side by side, improving things every minute. Even the diplomat felt inspired by their determination. The war faction ships finally broke formation and spread themselves around the system, preparing to strike. Their sensors studied Earth's defenses, expecting to find nothing impressive, but they were confused. Earth somehow had dozens of coordinated systems that weren't there days ago. New signals kept appearing. Defensive patterns kept shifting. Satellites they assumed were dead suddenly came alive with new programming. This wasn't normal for a primitive species. The war faction readjusted their strategy, expecting Earth to tire out. They didn't understand humans at all. Every time humans saw a problem, they fixed it. When they couldn't fix it, they invented something new. When something broke, they repaired it. When they didn't know what to do, they tried anyway. Humans weren't fighting yet, but their preparation was already a form of resistance. The diplomat watched Earth, glowing with activity, and felt something change inside them. They had come only to observe, but now they were attached. They believed in this species. They wanted Earth to survive, not only for the Council, but because humanity deserved a chance. The fleet adjusted again, preparing to send smaller attack units forward. But even before those units moved, Earth completed one more surprising action. Humans linked satellites from different countries into one giant shield of information. It wasn't a real shield, but it allowed Earth to track nearly everything happening around the planet. No one expected humans to work together so quickly, not even the humans themselves. The diplomat looked at the planet below, glowing with hope and effort, and thought, they are doing everything they can. They are not giving up. The fleet prepared its final approach. Earth stood ready. Not perfect, not advanced, not superior, but ready with everything they had built with their hands, hearts, and determination. The diplomat knew that the next moments would be the true beginning. The war faction thought this would be easy, but Earth was about to prove them wrong. The moment the enemy fleet crossed into the final approach path toward Earth, a strange silence spread across the diplomat's ship. It felt like space itself was holding its breath. The lights on the control panels dimmed, and the screens filled with new symbols as the fleet activated its weapons. The diplomat could feel the tension building inside them. They knew this was the moment the war faction had been waiting for, the point where they would finally strike. But what the war faction didn't know was that Earth was no longer unaware. Humans had sensed the coming danger long before this moment. They had prepared in their own unique way, different from any species the war faction had ever attacked. And now, even though Earth didn't have advanced weapons or powerful shields, it had something else: unity, courage, and a strong belief that they must not give up. The first wave of enemy scout ships moved closer. These ships were small, fast, and designed to test a planet's defenses. They scanned everything: the oceans, the cities, the mountains, the communication systems. They expected Earth to be confused, maybe even panicked. But instead, Earth reacted with calm alertness. Military bases tightened their defenses, scientists monitored the skies, and teams across the world shared information every second. Earth had never faced aliens before, yet somehow everyone acted like they had trained for this moment. Inside one of Earth's main observation stations, a group of scientists stared at the incoming signals. Their screens showed strange shapes and movements, not planes, not meteors, but something clearly artificial. They didn't scream or run. They simply looked at one another, nodded, and got back to work. They understood that fear wouldn't help anyone now. Down on Earth, everyday people were also reacting. Some sat in front of their radios and televisions, waiting for updates. Others prayed quietly. Some gathered in groups, discussing what might be happening. Even though not everyone knew the full truth, there was a feeling that something big was coming. People felt it in their bones. The diplomat watched Earth with deep concern, but also with admiration. They knew the war faction was powerful. They knew Earth's technology was much weaker. And yet, the diplomat couldn't shake the belief the humans had something strong inside them, something that could not be measured by machines or weapons. War faction commander gave the order for the first test strike. It wasn't a full attack, just a quick energy pulse aimed at Earth's outer communication network. The pulse moved like a silent wave through space, invisible to the human eye, but powerful enough to shut down entire systems. When the pulse hit the satellites, many of them flickered. Some turned off completely. For a moment, parts of Earth went dark. Communication lines dropped, and screens showed static. People looked up at the sky, sensing that something had just touched their world. But humans didn't freeze. They reacted immediately. Technicians rushed to restart the systems. Engineers rebooted satellites manually. Backup networks came online with surprising speed. Even though the damage was serious, Earth did not collapse the way the war faction expected. Instead, humans fixed things faster than anyone thought possible. The war faction grew irritated. They sent out a second pulse, stronger than the first. This time it hit harder. Some regions experienced electrical failures. A few power grids shut down. But again, humans responded with determination. They repaired, replaced, and restarted. Everything they could. The diplomat realized something important. The war faction was underestimating Earth because they didn't understand human nature. They didn't know that humans had lived with challenges for centuries. They had faced storms, earthquakes, wars, diseases, and every time they rebuilt. Humans had a strange strength that activated during hard times. Instead of falling apart, they came together. The enemy scout ships scanned their reactions. Their reports confused the fleet commander. The commander expected chaos, but instead, they saw coordination. They expected fear, but instead they saw preparation. They expected a collapse, but instead they saw resilience. Earth's military finally made their first defensive move. A set of long-range instruments were activated, sending out a powerful signal that cut through space like a bright wave. This signal didn't attack the fleet, but it disrupted their scanning for a moment. The enemy ships paused, confused by the unexpected interference. Humans didn't have advanced weapons, but they were clever with what they did have. The war faction. Commander ordered the scout ships to begin descending into Earth's atmosphere to gather closer readings. The diplomat felt their heart race. If those ships got too close, Earth would be forced to respond with whatever limited tools they had. The diplomat knew Earth couldn't afford a full confrontation yet, but something surprising happened. One of Earth's old satellites, a device humans had ignored for years, suddenly lit up with a signal. A group of young engineers had reprogrammed it earlier in the day, hoping it might help. They weren't even sure it would work, but they tried anyway. The satellite fired a burst of radio waves that created a strange electromagnetic cloud around the scout ships. It wasn't a weapon, just a strong interference field. The cloud caused the scout ships to lose control for a moment. They spun slightly off course, unable to maintain their path. The war faction commander grew annoyed. They didn't understand how a planet with such outdated machines could create so much trouble. The scout ships finally pushed through the interference and entered the atmosphere. And instantly, Earth responded again. Dozens of ground-based sensors activated, tracking their movement. Air bases launched jets, not to attack, but to observe and confuse the enemy ships with unpredictable flight patterns. Humans used everything: light, sound, heat, to distract and study the intruders. It was like watching ants defending their nest with tiny but effective tools. The diplomat couldn't help but smile. They knew the war faction would not appreciate this comparison, but that didn't matter. What mattered was that Earth was not helpless. The planet might have been technologically behind, but it was mentally sharp and emotionally strong. The fleet. Commander sent a command for the scout ships to fire warning shots. Small streaks of light fired downward, but before they could reach any target, Earth's jets released flares that redirected the beams into empty air. Humans didn't have shields, but they had instincts, training, and creativity. Each move. The war faction made scenes simple, but humans found a way to block, delay, confuse, or weaken it. The commander grew increasingly frustrated. They wanted Earth to surrender easily, not resist at every turn. They had attacked many planets before, but none reacted like this. Inside the diplomat's ship, a sudden alarm rang. It was a message from the council, a silent, encrypted signal. The diplomat read it quickly. The council had finally realized that something was very wrong. The war faction had broken too many rules. They were moving faster than allowed. They were using stronger weapons than agreed. The council ordered the diplomat to interfere if necessary. Not physically, but strategically. The diplomat was given permission to help Earth in any way that would not reveal the council's full presence. A strong wave of relief washed over the diplomat. At least now they were not completely alone. They looked toward Earth, which was now glowing with heat and energy from all the activity happening on the surface. The war faction sent more ships toward the atmosphere, preparing for a deeper strike. But Earth was ready again. Humans launched. Their strongest communication burst yet, a combination of signals from dozens of nations. The burst didn't damage the enemy ships, but it overloaded their sensors for a few seconds. Those few seconds gave Earth a huge advantage. Humans used the moment to reposition jets, redirect satellites, secure communication lines, and send warnings to areas that might be targeted. It was a brilliant move, not based on power, but on timing. The diplomat could see that the fleet commander was getting desperate. The war faction didn't expect the first stage of their attack to take this long. They were used to quick victories, not battles filled with unpredictable and clever resistance. The commander finally gave the order for a more aggressive move. The second wave of ships, larger and more powerful, began powering up their engines. But just as they prepared to move, Earth did something unexpected again. A massive surge of lights appeared across the planet as thousands of humans turned on emergency systems at the same time. The coordinated glow wasn't planned. It happened naturally, almost instinctively. These lights created a strange pattern that interfered with the war faction's energy readings. Their ships struggled to track the planet's heat signatures. Earth had unintentionally created a defense shield made of pure human activity. The diplomat felt a mix of fear and pride. Earth wasn't winning, but it was resisting. And in resistance, there was hope. The war faction's second wave hesitated, unsure of how to move next. Their commander paused, trying to understand the unpredictable situation. And at that moment, the diplomat realized something powerful. The war had not truly begun yet, but Earth had already changed the outcome. Not with weapons, not with technology, but with unity, courage, creativity, and the refusal to be crushed. Earth was not a weak planet, it was a brave one. And the fleet was beginning to realize it. The moment this war faction fleet paused above Earth, space felt strangely quiet. It was not the peaceful kind of silence, but the heavy, waiting kind. Like everything, stars, dust, light, had stopped moving just to see what would happen next. Even the diplomat, floating inside their small observation ship, felt that pressure in their chest. They knew the war faction was confused now, And when a powerful enemy becomes confused, anything can happen. Down on Earth, people watched the sky with fear and hope mixed together. Some stood in open fields. Some looked through windows. Some gathered on rooftops. Even though they could not see the ships with their bare eyes, people felt something above them, an invisible weight pressing from the sky. Not all around the world, radios, TVs, and phones buzzed with updates. Governments were talking to one another as fast as they could. Scientists were analyzing signals. Pilots were waiting in their jets. Even regular people felt like they had a role just by staying calm and caring for one another. Nobody wanted war. But nobody wanted to give up either. The diplomat received a silent message from the Galactic Council. It was short. Observe. Interfere only if destruction is certain. The diplomat read it twice. The Council did not want to expose themselves too early, but they were ready if Earth was pushed to the edge. The diplomat felt a sense of responsibility that made their arms tremble. They had grown strangely attached to Earth, this chaotic, noisy, emotional planet. They wanted to protect it in any way they could. Up above, the war faction commander paced inside their flagship. Their plans were falling apart. They had expected a simple mission: arrive, intimidate, force surrender. But Earth was resisting in ways they couldn't predict. Not because of advanced weapons, but because humans responded to danger with a level of intensity the commander had not seen before. Every time the war faction struck, humans adapted. Every time humans were pushed down, they stood up again. Commander looked at the reports coming from their scout ships. The data made no sense to them. Earth's technology was low level, but Earth's reactions were sharp, quick, clever, emotional, in a way that created unpredictable patterns. The commander made a decision. They would send the flagship closer to Earth's moon and prepare a direct strike. They believed a strong attack would finally force Earth to surrender. The diplomat's eyes widened as they watched the flagship move. This was not a small action. The war faction was now stepping into full conflict mode. Earth spotted the movement. 2. Sensors lit up, screens blinked red, and warnings spread across military stations. The moon's surface reflected the bright engines of the alien ship, making it even more obvious that something big was about to happen. Earth had to act, but humans had limited tools. They had courage, but courage alone could not deflect the kind of weapon the flagship carried. Inside a hidden underground base, engineers gathered around a control table. They spoke quickly, but calmly. They knew they needed to use everything they had left: old satellites, unfinished projects, experimental systems that had never been tested. Nothing could be wasted now. One engineer suddenly pointed at an old device. In the corner, something built for space research years ago, but abandoned due to lack of funding. It had the ability to create a massive burst of energy, not strong enough to destroy a ship, but maybe strong enough to interfere with one. It was a risky idea. The device could fail. It could break. But failure was better than doing nothing. They agreed. Earth prepared to launch its last major defense. Not an attack, but a disruption. The diplomat monitored everything. Their heart raced faster with each second. They wanted to help directly, but they couldn't reveal themselves yet. Earth had to stand on its own. Still, the diplomats shifted their ship closer, ready to intervene if things spiraled beyond control. The war faction flagship charged its main weapon. Dark energy gathered near its core. It looked like a glowing storm, building strength, ready to be released toward the planet below. Earth had minutes, maybe less. The old experimental device was activated. It hummed loudly. Sparks flew from its sides, as if the machine was waking up from a long sleep. Engineers typed commands rapidly. The countdown began. Back in orbit, the war faction watched with growing impatience. The commander believed that Earth would finally break under pressure. They had no idea that something unexpected was coming. Their way. The device fired. A massive burst of electromagnetic energy shot into space. It wasn't neat or pretty. It was messy, loud, and uneven, just like many human inventions. But it worked. The burst hit the war faction flagship with surprising accuracy. The flagship shook. Its sensors went blind for a moment. Its navigation systems flickered. Its weapon charge froze halfway. The commander staggered, grabbing the edge of the control table. They had not expected this kind of interference. To them, Earth looked small and weak, but this burst showed that Earth had the ability to surprise even the strongest enemies. The entire fleet paused in confusion. The diplomat let out a breath they didn't know they were holding. Earth had bought itself time, precious time. Humans used that moment immediately. Pilots moved into better positions. Communications between nations improved. Power grids stabilized. For a short while, Earth felt almost united as one heart. War faction regained partial control of their ship, but the temporary setback made them rethink their plan. The commander realized something alarming. If Earth could disrupt a flagship, then Earth might be more trouble than they thought. Not because of technology, but because humans were unpredictable and stubborn. The fleet hesitated again. This hesitation formed a crack, a psychological weakness. The diplomat noticed it instantly. The Galactic Council also noticed. They sent another message. If resistance continues, we intervene. The diplomat felt courage rising inside them. Maybe Earth didn't have to fight alone anymore. But something else happened that nobody expected. A group of war faction officers inside the flagship began questioning the commander's plan. They whispered among themselves, pointing at the battlefield reports. They didn't understand why their powerful fleet was struggling against a planet that was supposed to be primitive. Some of them started doubting the invasion itself. They feared that the commander had miscalculated. They feared that attacking Earth would lead to embarrassing failure, something worse than defeat in their culture. That doubt spread quietly. Finally, it reached the commander, and the commander felt something they had not felt in years. Uncertainty. If Earth was capable of this kind of resistance now, what would they become in a few decades? What if Earth survived and remembered this attack? What if this primitive species grew stronger and became a powerful enemy in the future? Suddenly, the commander felt something close to fear. They gave a sharp order. Withdraw the first wave. The bridge officers froze, shocked. The commander repeated the order. Reluctantly, they obeyed. One by one, several ships pulled back from the atmosphere. The humans watching from Earth saw the bright lights moving away, not closer. A wave of relief washed over the whole planet. People cried, hugged, prayed, or simply stared at the sky in disbelief. They had survived the first major strike, but the war faction wasn't done yet. The commander still had their pride. They prepared a final message to send to Earth, a warning that the fleet would return someday. Before they could send it, the diplomat finally acted. Using the council's permission. They sent a coded transmission directly to the flagship. The message was simple. Leave now. Earth will not fall. And if you stay, the council will intervene. The commander read it. Their face stiffened. They knew the council rarely threatened intervention unless they were fully prepared to act. Commander realized they were cornered, not by Earth alone, but by the possibility of a larger political disaster. Finally, they gave the order. All ships, full retreat. The entire fleet turned slowly, engines burning bright. The war faction left the solar system, shrinking into the distance until they were just tiny specks of light. Earth had done it. Somehow, against logic, against power, against the odds, Earth had survived, not through advanced weapons, not through perfect planning, but through unity, quick thinking, courage, and the unwillingness to surrender. When the diplomat finally approached Earth's orbit, they looked down at the blue planet with a deep sense of respect. They whispered to themselves, they attacked Earth? They weren't insane, just foolish. Word spread across the Galactic Council within hours. Representatives from many species gathered, shocked by the news. They were amazed that Earth, the world they once thought too young, too primitive, had stood its ground against a feared war faction. And now, Earth had earned something rare in the galaxy, a reputation, the reputation of a species that might be small, emotional, unpredictable, but impossible to break.